So, welcome everyone to the very first After Hour. We are going to be talking about Sea of Stars, and I wanted to do this episode in particular because I felt like Tom and we're joined by Chris Coplien from Retro Hangover Podcast here, which I appreciate you hanging around after this hour to talk about this game because. Look, you were invested in this game. Tom is invested in the story, and I want to know why. Because we've played some other JRPGs that didn't seem to really get his fancy. Like we had Dave from Tales from the Backlog recommend to us like Chained Echoes, for example, and he was not really into that game. But this game, he's like, I'm all in for it. I was like, you barely did anything in this game. How are you that invested? That's where I'm confused.
You want me to tell you why? I could tell you why,
please.
Or at least I could tell you why I think I'm invested. So I mean, it's very apparent very early on, and I'm sure the developers have gone forward and said this. Chris can confirm it, but this is very heavily inspired by Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger, of course, being my favorite game of all time. And there's stuff in here from like the camp sequence to the fact that they got the composer. To just the tone and the way the game looks and the character interactions, it just screams spiritual successor to Chrono Trigger to me. And I've always wanted to play Chrono Trigger 2. Chrono Trigger 2 will never exist. I like Chrono Cross a whole lot, but it is not Chrono Trigger 2. So... if it takes some people who really loved Chrono Trigger to make the sequel to Chrono Trigger, you know, an off-brand or, you know, you can't use the same characters and whatever because Square will come after you. But this just feels so much like Chrono Trigger to me and elicits the same kind of reactions, you know, in my heart of hearts. And that's the why. Within an hour, I was like, yeah, this feels like the way that I felt when I used to play Chrono Trigger in the late 90s, you know? Mid 90s.
Interesting. Because like, I mean, yeah, I mean, they modernized it a little bit by adding the kind of timing mechanics during the battle systems. But okay, the game looks pretty good for what it is. And I guess the music is okay. I don't know. I mean, I'm still trying to, I can swing either way in terms of like, if I like it or not, just because of the way that first hour presented itself. And it might be just because I'm not that big of a JRPG fan. I'm sorry, but I'm just, that's probably what it is. But it's not like I don't like turn-based games because like I'm playing Baldur's Gate 3 right now and I'm enjoying the hell out of that. And that's a turn-based game. I like the turn-based combat in Midnight Suns. The rest of the game is trash, but that's fine. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, and Chris, you've I guess you've been following the development of this game for some time.
Yeah.
So what have you learned about it and like what really got you interested in this game?
One of the things that got me really interested in this game was it was coming from a developer that like an indie developer that was really well known and renowned for The Messenger. How have I played The Messenger? No. Just because Ninja Gaiden just doesn't get me going. It's not one of those games that I have a ton of love for. I'm not saying it's bad. I think it's a very good quality game, but it's not good enough that like I look at The Messenger like, I gotta go get The Messenger. But people love The Messenger. It was considered to be really high quality. So when they come out with this game, and much for the reasons that Tom said, it's a game that looks, I won't say looks, it's obviously taking heavy inspiration from Chrono Trigger in terms of its approach to design, in terms of approach to its environments, and on the surface and how it approaches its gameplay. And there's a lot of these gameplay elements that once you get into combos and all these other things like that really will resonate with a lot of Chrono Trigger fans. And I love Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger is probably my favorite Super Nintendo game, and I'm absolutely in love with it. And the other thing I'm looking at here when it comes to a game like Sea of Stars, in terms of the visual presentation and their commitment to the music, insofar as getting Yasunori Matsuda and the composer, what was his name, Tom? From The Messenger.
Eric Brown.
Eric Brown, and the OST from The Messenger was also very good. So there's a big dedication into not half-assing this, and this was very, very apparent through their Kickstarter drive. And I know marketing's like half the battle and getting you to invest in all these things and sell you on it. So this is why I'm invested in it, because the way it's making me feel is very reminiscent of a Chrono Trigger. And yes, I am somewhat disappointed in the first hour. So if I had just come to this and I knew nothing about this game, the first hour would probably turn me off, much like you said. But I do have hope for it because the DNA, the mechanics, the structure, everything that I find in games that I do love is all here. And like the one fallback is that timing mechanic, because I do know there's a little bit of input lag on my computer, and input lag can be killer when you need to be precise. And there are instances where this needs to be precise. But aside from that, take all that away, the indie revolution that I've seen in the past couple of years is fantastic. And to see it be more focused on JRPGs, whether it be this, whether it be Eden Chronicle or a host of other games where you're getting the real inspiration and a real concentrated effort towards reviving these old Super Nintendo PS1 style RPGs and actually trying to deliver on all facets of it, as opposed to just, hey, this is just our passion project. Nothing wrong with passion projects, but when you have a clear vision of something you're trying to emulate and get people to feel, and you have this template of excellence, I want to see what you can do with it, especially if you already as a developer have a pedigree. So that's why I'm invested in this. This is why I'm looking forward to how it turns out, and I'm going to do everything I can to see it to the end, because the pudding's there. Now I just got to check out that proof.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's fair. I'm just trying to get the perspectives of two people that, one really enjoyed Chrono Trigger and that style of game, and like, I guess almost in a way convinced me. I mean, I'm not saying that I don't, because I did. I clearly said I wanted to keep playing this game, but but it's like, for me, it's like, how much longer do I want to invest my time in this? And is this a game?
To me, it feels like that first hour gets you out of the hard part, right? Or the suffering part of just exposition. I mean, the first part of most story-based games is by default exposition. Like, it has to be. You have to establish the characters, you have to establish the world, you have to establish the rules. All of that stuff happens in that first hour or so of game. I think there was enough of the mechanics and how the game is gonna play in that hour that I know what most of this game is gonna look like, and I'm attracted by it, right? I see the Chrono Trigger DNA. I see the little improvements that should stack and continue to flourish as the combat gets deeper and you add more characters and you add more enemies and there are different types and different weapons and all these sorts of things start to come into the picture. I think just from the base level, the boring version of it was fun for me. So I think it's only going to get better from here.
I actually disagree with Tom here in a sense, because Final Fantasy VII is not my favorite RPG of all time. It's not even my favorite Final Fantasy. I've probably in the top 5 of them. It's not a bad game. But the thing about Final Fantasy VII, and to contrast this with Sea of Stars, is Final Fantasy VII, when you turn that game on and you start playing the game, you're going on a bombing run. And through that experience, you're learning the gameplay mechanics. It just throws you into it. It gives you a menu and say, figure it out. And then you get to a boss battle and it explains to you and says, hey, some bosses are going to have different conditions than normal enemies. So you're getting that right in there. And the entire time you're getting this kind of more high stress environment. You're not learning a ton about the characters, but you're learning, hey, there's something important about what they're doing. They're kind of explaining what they're doing in the current situation and why it's important to these characters that you don't really know yet. And then you get done with this bombing run, you get the title screen, or no, that was like in the demo, but like it throws you in there and just all of a sudden this big explosion, a lot of excitement, and then it kind of cools down and then they start talking. So you're already invested, you're excited. If you want to contrast that, essentially what Sea of Stars does is like it's the scene when you get out of Midgar and you go to Calm and you start talking about what Cloud was doing with Sephiroth back in Niflheim, and that's how that game starts. I guarantee you a lot of people would not have been invested in Final Fantasy VII if that's how that game started. So if I'm going back to what Chris's concerns are, like, I just don't know, because this first hour is all exposition and it's all flashback, I can completely get it. It should have just like done a dungeon right off the bat, a full dungeon, not just 2 battles of you trying to get to a campfire. It should have really ended with a boss that was high stakes, that really got into the nitty gritty of the mechanics, but still an easy enough boss that you feel confident in the challenges to come. It didn't do that. I'm not saying that it's going to result in being a bad game, but it's not the best draw.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, like that, the tutorial section where you're going through that test, right? I feel like if they started with that, like if they did that whole the kid sequence first, I would have been fine with it. Like
I was curious about that. I was curious how you would. That was going to be my question to you, Chris. Is like, should they have started with the 10-year-old versions of these characters from the jump, and then you watch them age up and just in a just play it in chronological order?
I would have thought that was fine, but I don't know what you think, Chris, about that.
You can do that. You certainly can do that. And there's examples like that in the Dragon Quest series, and various other RPGs where you start as a kid and you build it up from there. But you have to establish the beginning of them as children, or still you have to have some sort of conflict, some shocking event that will happen in order to force that flashback. That flashback, the reason they went back to it was just far too calm and lackadaisical for my liking, and it didn't really set the scene in a way that would make, I think, most people invested in what was going on.
But like, it didn't have to necessarily be a flashback, right? Because like, even that particular, they talk about, oh man, that was like a really, like, it kind of sucked what happened to Garl.
They built it up way too much.
Right, they built it up way too much. Yeah. But like, if I just saw that from the beginning, like, and then seeing Garl get his eye like stuck out, like, get plucked out or whatever it was, like, I think that would have been I would have had a more emotional connection at that point. Because like, oh wow, like dang, like this kid, like he doesn't know anything, he doesn't have any powers, and he's the one that's going to get the short end of the stick in this particular situation.
Literally.
Yeah. So like, and I don't know about you, but I honestly, I feel they're setting him up to be the bad guy.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a level of that. And I do agree with you, Chris. I think it would have been more impactful if they hadn't told you something was going to happen to him. Like, it would have been a much more shocking, like, if they had just arrived there without any kind of prompting.
Right.
But again, then they would have had to open the game with them as children, and not, and just like never show you adult versions of them until they are adults. I honestly don't
see the reason for that intro. I don't see the reason, because you're going back to that anyway. And then the other thing I felt about this game, I felt a lot of it was just like on rails. Like, a lot of it felt very like you were kind of forced into certain paths. Like, I didn't really feel like you didn't have much choice.
Yeah.
In terms of how you navigated the world and stuff like that. At least from where I am, or like where it was, right? And I get it. Like, you're starting off the game, and like you want your players to get to a certain story beat or whatever it is. But that was, for me, it was a little frustrating because of that. But I don't know.
Well, I could completely understand that as well, because normally when you're put into a situation where you're encouraging the player to walk around a city and see everything that they can, it's to encourage exploration of a hub. So this is kind of like when you're playing Mass Effect and running around the Citadel. You're going to want to know what's in the Citadel, because you're going to spend a lot of time in the Citadel. But from what I can tell, you're spending a lot of time in this little training area where they want you to go, check out this wing and check out that wing. But you're not going to spend a lot of time there. It's definitely just an introductory place that you're going to be leaving almost immediately. And I don't know. I mean, who knows? Maybe you might go back there for whatever reason later on in the game, but I get the feeling that it's time almost wasted. It could have been used to set you up to get interested in something that will pay off longer. And that's, I think the fact that you're saying Garl is the villain is almost more wishful thinking than anything, because no, you're right. Like, the way they set it up, it seems like if you're trying to be cynical and you're trying to find any sort of depth into what's happening in this first hour of plot development, that's almost the logical conclusion. I'm just not sure if they're going to go down there, which even worries me that this first hour, as good as this game can be, because it could end up being just absolutely delightful, but this first hour that opened is rather weak and doesn't do much. It's wasted in a sense.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's why, like, when we were talking offline about this, like Chris and I were talking offline about this, like you were excited to keep playing this game.
Yes.
But then you had all these, like, kind of, I don't know how I feel about this game so far. And it's like, and again, I get it. Like, the format of our show doesn't necessarily work well for these types of games.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I mean, but at the same time, Tom seemed very invested in the first hour.
Yeah.
Like, he got what he needed from this game. So, you know, there's that whole thing where, you know, it's whatever, whoever's playing. But, you know, I'm not going to hate on the fact that he's enjoyed it, and I didn't really get that. But
I think it is kind of the nature of these crowd-funded games, though, right? If you're building your game from the ground up with a very specific group of people in mind, you have basically your shareholders have told you what they want from the product. Like, you can make it a certain way. And at least for me, it worked, right? Like, I may not have invested money in this game up front, but they hit their demographic. Like, they nailed me 100%, even with just this first hour. So they could perhaps have done a weak job with it. You know, I definitely think it could have been better. I agree. I think maybe it would have made sense to just start with them as kids, you know, and just go chronologically from there. I do think that some of this, I agree that this area that they have you explore, there's not a whole lot of reason to explore it. Like, I didn't pick up any extra items that I didn't get, like, you know, an extra healing potion because I went around a corner. I'd like, right. You know, I did do that. I looked around, I checked all the, you know, I read all the bookcases and things like that, but I didn't get anything for it. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of disappointing. Usually when you explore and you do these sorts of things, you get something out of it. But even with all of that, they got away with it because they got the music right. They got the art right. They got all of these things right. And they're not, you know, they made it for people who loved Chrono Trigger and those sorts of adjacent people who will probably forgive them. You know, all three of us have, and said, we're going to keep playing this. Yeah. Whereas if you were making this and you had somebody looming over you, a publisher or somebody saying, no, this is weak, you need to edit this. You know, there's a very famous saying that, you know, Star Wars A New Hope was saved in the edit. Now, a lot of movies are, and you just don't know about it. But George Lucas' original cut of Star Wars opens on planet Tatooine with Luke just kind of whining with his friends. Okay? That, as we all know, that's not how A New Hope starts, right? It starts with a big battle action sequence, introduces stormtroopers, introduces the big enemies, introduces Star Destroyers. It's a very action-packed, whoa, like there are stakes here, this is crazy. And then you get down to Tatooine and it's boring down there.
Yeah.
Because you need to get your audience invested and get them hooked before you start doing all the boring exposition stuff. So, but if you're George Lucas and you're making The Phantom Menace, it doesn't matter, right? You could do it that way because Star Wars fans already exist. And now you're making the thing for those people. You're not making it for everybody. I mean, you are making it for everybody, but the safety's off, right? He funded it himself. He can do whatever the hell he wants.
Yeah.
So I think the same kind of thing. They're a victim of their own success in a way, is I guess what I'm trying to say here, is that they can get away with fumbling this first hour because the people who are playing the first hour already want to play the game.
And I wouldn't say it's necessarily a fumble. I think you bring up a fantastic point. Their mind is not a fumble because, and it's not exclusive to Sea of Stars. You're seeing this a lot of JRPGs right now, especially I've heard people that have been playing Triangle Strategy. They say there's so much dialogue in there they're falling asleep. But I think this is just something that a lot of JRPG developers, or just RPG developers, mostly JRPG, I'll say it's mostly JRPG. They know their demographic is going to get invested in this game if they feel like it's there. And I think it's actually making a lot of people who develop these kind of games almost rest on their laurels, because we haven't seen an opening in your typical JRPG. I don't know about Final Fantasy 16. I haven't played it. I didn't have any idea what the hell was going on in Final Fantasy 15. And I was a little bit bored with Dragon Quest 11. But what's going on? So I don't want to say all JRPGs. I don't play a lot of modern games, unfortunately. But what I will say, what I've seen from a lot of JRPGs that I have been able to play is a lot of them have slow openings. A lot of them take a while to get to the point. And this is something I think that you kind of hit on really well here, Chris, is like you say, yeah, our show isn't really designed to approach these games in the most appropriate manner because we only have an hour. The thing is, though, is that yes, I'm going to continue to play this because I know about this game. I know what kind of game it is. I've invested in it. I know what's coming to me. I'm trying to be completely objective and highly critical because I'm on a kind of review show. I'm going to give my honest opinion, but I know I'm probably going to like this game when it's all said and done. But the thing is that casual game players are going to hear about this game. They're going to pick it up. They're going to download it. They're going to check it out. And then they're only going to give that game an hour, which is why your show is brilliant, because you are really approaching this from the perspective that most gamers would check out a game they have never heard of before. So if that game after an hour is something that they're not going to be invested in, then they are probably going to put it down and erase it. They're probably not going to be interested in it. If the way it opens is very pedestrian and very expositional, when people are expecting something with a lot of action and gameplay, they're probably going to be like, wow, okay, well, all these nerds don't know what they're talking about. It's just another JRPG. I'm leaving this one alone. They can have it. And I think that leans into that point that you kind of disregarded, but I think is extremely important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I see that 100%. Like this is not approachable for someone who isn't coming at this like loving Chrono Trigger or loving JRPGs. If you just pick this up and played an hour of this, like, yeah, I mean, I could see you being like, this is tedious and boring, and why would I keep playing this?
Yeah, it's interesting because like I thought, and I don't think I went back to it yet, but I thought like the opening for Chained Echoes was a lot better. Like that game, and I don't know, Chris, if you played that yet.
I have not yet, unfortunately. I really want to.
So, but it's got a great opening. It's got mechs. It's got like weird animal people and stuff like that. But the thing that threw me off with that game, and I think Tom, you had the same issue, was you're invested with one like a group of characters, and then they switch it off to someone else.
Yeah.
And you're like, what the hell? Why do I care about these people anymore? And it's like, now I have to invest with these people. And it might be because I haven't played enough JRPGs to understand this trope of like switching characters this much, that I was getting frustrated about that. So that was my thing. I think Tom, if that game kept you with the same characters, you probably would have liked that too then.
Yeah, definitely. Because story is almost one of the most important things for me to get hooked on a game. Now, obviously the game has to be fun to play. The mechanics can't get in the way of the story. But I love stories, right? I love reading comics. I love books. I love video games. I love movies. I love stories. Tell me a story.
Yeah.
And if you can get me invested in the characters within an hour, I'm gonna probably be interested in the rest of your story, whatever that story is, as long as that story doesn't take 130, 140 hours to tell. You know, like I need to know that. You know, I'm not gonna start, the first couple of episodes of a show that's been on for 12 seasons. Like I'm just not gonna do it. There's too much of a time investment there.
Yeah,
if you pitch me an anime that's 12 episodes in the season, yeah, I'll watch the first couple episodes of that. and potentially watch the whole season, you know?
Yeah, I had a similar experience with watching a show, which was The Expanse, and a lot of people have been telling me to watch that show, and I watched 2 or 3 episodes. I was like, I don't get it. Really wasn't. I just wasn't really getting into it, and then I just put it down because I was like, okay, but I don't know. It's different strokes for different folks, I guess. But then now I like Star Trek, Strange New Worlds. And I've never really liked Star Trek, so it was like I was surprised about that too. So,
but you told me it was a very good jumping on point for you.
It was a good jumping on point too. Yeah.
So that's important too, right? Is like you have to know what are you trying to accomplish with your story.
Yeah.
You know, are you trying to be approachable to new audiences, or are you just going to expect that they've seen 3 other programs, or
right?
Know your comics in and out, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I think there's room,
the
MCU right there.
There's room for all of it. There's room for all of it, depending on who you're trying to make the story for.
Yeah. So yeah, that's all I got right now. Chris, any other final thoughts here in this after hour?
No, I'm looking forward to playing more Sea of Stars first and foremost. I'm still psyched for it. I'm still worried about the timing mechanics, but I think I'm going to be okay. I think I'm going to survive. But thank you so much for having me on again, and it's been a blast. And yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, again, thank you again for joining us on this very first after hour, and really talking about this game, because I was just curious to hear everyone's thoughts about this particular game and why they really thought that this is going the distance for them. So yeah, all right, well, that is it for this first episode, and thank you so much everyone for listening, and we might catch you on another one.
Thanks everybody.